Here's a truth that will make you uncomfortable. The more desperately you seek approval, the more you betray the very mind that makes you human. Every handshake you force, every laugh you fake, every silence you endure to avoid confrontation, these aren't acts of social grace, they're acts of intellectual surrender. And the architect of this revelation wasn't some modern self-help guru or contemporary philosopher. It was Niccolò Machiavelli, a man who understood that most people aren't driven by truth but by the desperate need to belong. Machiavelli observed something that society has spent centuries trying to hide, that the herd doesn't want you to be free. It wants you to be manageable. It wants you to smile when you're angry, agree when you want to object, and nod when every fiber of your being screams resistance. But here's what he saw that others missed. The more sociable you become, the more you dilute your intelligence to match the lowest common denominator in the room. Because real thinking doesn't make friends, it makes waves. It disturbs the comfortable consensus that keeps everyone asleep. Think about your last social gathering. How many times did you bite your tongue? How many moments did you feel the urge to speak truth but chose politeness instead? How many times did you laugh at jokes that weren't funny, agree with opinions that made your skin crawl, or remain silent when your conscience begged you to speak? Each of these moments represents a small death, the death of authenticity in service of acceptance. And what did you gain? A few more minutes of social comfort? What did you lose? A piece of your intellectual integrity. This isn't about becoming antisocial or cruel. This is about recognizing the price of perpetual performance. Every social interaction demands a cost, and that cost is always paid by your authentic self. You trade clarity for comfort, truth for acceptance, depth for shallow connection, and somewhere in this endless exchange you begin to forget who you actually are beneath all the masks you wear. Machiavelli understood that in politics, and life is politics, the appearance of virtue often matters more than virtue itself, but he left an unspoken warning between the lines. When you start living entirely for appearances, you forget how to live with substance. When you become easy to digest, you stop being nutritious. When you're so agreeable that everyone likes you, you've become so diluted that nobody really knows you, including yourself. The tragedy isn't that you become stupid in the traditional sense. Your IQ doesn't drop. Your skills don't vanish, but something far more insidious happens. You outsource your judgment to the group. You stop thinking from your core and start thinking from the crowd's expectations. You begin to feel smart while conforming, clever while echoing, wise while repeating the same recycled thoughts that keep everyone comfortable. This is how stupidity disguises itself in the modern world. It doesn't look like ignorance, it looks like charm, like social success, like everyone wanting to be around you. But underneath the surface, it's intellectual rot. It's a mind that has been traded for handshakes and hollow smiles. It's the slow decay of original thought in favor of groupthink. Watch yourself at the next social event. Notice how your thoughts change when you enter a room full of people. Notice how your opinions soften, how your edges disappear, how your authentic reactions get filtered through the question, what will they think? This isn't social awareness, this is intellectual submission. You're not reading the room, you're being read by it. You're not influencing the conversation, you're being influenced by the desperate need to belong. The group doesn't want wisdom from you, it wants comfort, consensus, predictability. It wants you to play your assigned role, the funny one, the agreeable one, the one who never makes anyone uncomfortable by speaking inconvenient truths. And if you dare to be the one who reminds others of what they've abandoned, if you dare to speak with the voice they've silenced in themselves, they will turn on you, not because you're wrong, but because you're right. And your presence becomes a mirror reflecting their own intellectual surrender. So you learn to stay quiet. You learn to nod at the right moments, laugh on cue, and keep your deeper thoughts locked away. And with each performance, your mind dulls a little more. The sharpness of your original thoughts gets replaced by social scripts, The fire of your authentic reactions gets smothered by the need to be likable. Your questions become predictable. Your dreams become marketable. Your rebellion becomes a memory. The most insidious part of this process is that it feels like growth. You tell yourself you're learning to get along with people, becoming more mature, developing social skills, but what you're actually doing is developing the skill of self-erasure. You're becoming an expert at disappearing in plain sight. You're mastering the art of being present in body while absent in spirit. Modern society has added a third driving force to Machiavelli's observation about love and fear: validation. You want to be validated so desperately that you'll betray your deepest convictions for a heart emoji. You'll water down your most profound insights to avoid being the person who makes others think too hard. You'll echo opinions that aren't yours just to avoid the terrifying possibility of standing alone with your thoughts. And then you wonder why your mental life feels like static, why your thoughts seem shallow, why you feel disconnected even when surrounded by people, why you're exhausted after social events. It's because you've been performing a one-person show for an audience that doesn't even know the real you. You've been shouting to please others, while your authentic voice has grown so quiet you can barely hear it yourself. This isn't about becoming a hermit or rejecting human connection. This is about recovering your ability to think without interference, to feel without performance, to exist without seeking constant approval. This is about remembering that your mind is not a democracy where everyone gets a vote. It's a kingdom, and you are its sovereign. Machiavelli never begged to be understood. He wrote as if the reader was either ready for his insights or wasn't, and if they weren't, that was their problem, not his. This is the spirit missing in today's social media-driven world. Everyone wants to be understood, liked, followed, validated. But true intelligence doesn't beg for reception. It simply radiates. It polarizes. It divides. It doesn't ask permission to exist. When you stop performing for others, something interesting happens. The room might grow quiet. The party might move on without you. The group might pretend not to hear your authentic voice. But this isn't rejection, it's revelation. It reveals who was actually listening to you versus who was just waiting for you to play your expected role. It shows you the difference between connection and collision, between being seen and being used. The group is allergic to minds that refuse to be molded. They can't shape you into what they need you to be, and people hate what they can't control. So they'll label you difficult, arrogant, cold, detached, but what they really mean is, you remind me of the intellectual freedom I traded away, and that makes me uncomfortable. Your clarity becomes their curse because it illuminates their compromise. Now comes the real test of your awakening. Will you soften yourself again to soothe their discomfort? Will you dilute your newfound clarity to make others feel better about their intellectual surrender? Or will you stand in your raw, burning truth and let the world adjust to you instead of the other way around? Most people fail this test. They taste freedom, feel its sharp edges, and then run back to the comfortable prison of social acceptance. They discover their authentic voice and then immediately lower it to a whisper because it sounds too loud in a world of silence. They find their intellectual sovereignty and then trade it back for the familiar chains of groupthink because independence feels too lonely. But here's what Machiavelli understood that most people never will. The average person is easy to predict, easy to please, easy to lead, precisely because they've trained themselves not to think too deeply, not to speak too honestly, not to live too independently. They fear the consequences of real thought. They're terrified of the isolation that comes with intellectual integrity, and in that fear, stupidity finds its most loyal host. Stupidity in the modern world doesn't need to be dramatic. It doesn't always look like ignorance or incompetence. Sometimes it looks like perfect social skills. Sometimes it looks like everyone loving you, everyone wanting to be around you, everyone thinking you're wonderful. But underneath that polished exterior is a mind that has been gutted, a soul that has been traded for applause, an identity that changes based on who's watching. You face a choice that you've been avoiding for years, maybe decades. Will you continue kneeling to social ease, or will you finally sharpen the blade of your mind and cut through the noise? Will you dare to be misunderstood? Will you dare to be disliked, misread, rejected, not because you failed, but because you refuse to fade into the background of other people's expectations? This is where Machiavellian clarity begins, not in domination over others, but in ruthless sovereignty over yourself, not in pleasing crowds, but in walking away from them without guilt, not in networking for advantage, but in nourishing your authentic self. Not in seeking applause, but in choosing solitude when solitude serves truth. Solitude, when chosen rather than imposed, isn't emptiness, it's power. It's the forge where your real self gets tempered. It's where you learn the difference between being alone and being lonely. It's where you discover that your own thoughts, when freed from the constant interference of social expectations, are actually quite interesting company. But understand this, once you choose this path, once you prioritize clarity over comfort, something irreversible happens. You develop an allergy to fakeness. Every time you hear small talk, you'll flinch. Every time someone performs a laugh, you'll see right through it. Every time you're invited to conform, your mind will resist automatically, not out of arrogance, but because something in you has awakened to the cost of compliance. You'll find yourself in rooms where everyone is laughing and feel hollow inside. You'll recognize the recycled phrases, the social scripts people run to avoid original thought. And you'll stay quiet not because you don't have anything to say, but because nothing real can survive in that shallow atmosphere. You'll leave parties earlier. You'll stop answering calls that don't feed your mind. You'll begin building a life with fewer people but stronger foundations. This transformation isn't comfortable. People will sense you've changed even if they can't articulate how. They'll say things like, "You're not the same anymore," or "You've become so serious." And you'll smile, not to agree with their assessment, but to acknowledge the obvious truth. You're not the same because you've stopped being negotiable. The old version of you was available, approachable, relatable. This version is more elusive, more reserved, more strategic. People sense that you've stopped needing their approval, and it unsettles them. In a world addicted to attention, indifference is power. When you no longer flinch at the threat of being alone, you become untouchable. Being misunderstood isn't a flaw in this new way of being, it's a filter. It keeps out the people who are only attracted to your performance, not your essence. Every time you're misread, it's the universe removing distractions from your path. Every misjudgment is a layer of camouflage being peeled away, revealing who actually sees the real you. And if no one does, that's not a tragedy. That's an opportunity to finally see yourself clearly. This is where true sovereignty begins, not in performance for others, but in presence with yourself. The kind of presence that doesn't shrink or expand depending on the audience. The kind that sits in silence and feels no urge to fill the space with noise. This presence terrifies society, because it can't be bought, can't be manipulated, can't be controlled through guilt or seduction. Machiavelli called this fortitude of spirit, the inner resilience that leaders possess. But this spirit isn't built through praise or validation. It's forged in solitude, tempered in rejection, strengthened in moments when everyone else leaves and you remain undaunted. This process isn't romantic or comfortable, it's ruthless. But it's the only path to genuine self-command. And that command becomes the foundation of real power, not the kind that screams for attention, but the kind that walks into a room and makes others adjust their energy without saying a word, without effort, without performance, just presence, just truth, just unmistakable clarity that comes from a mind that knows itself. But this clarity must be defended. The world will constantly try to pull you back with distractions, guilt, and seduction. It will whisper, "Come back just a little, be more friendly, be more agreeable, don't be so intense." And the moment you listen, you lose your edge. You dull the blade. Soon you're back to echoing others, nodding along, smiling through clenched teeth. Don't go back. Not for love, not for comfort, not for ease. What you're building isn't temporary, it's a legacy, a standard, a code of someone who thinks before they speak, who observes before they react, who doesn't just respond to the world but reshapes it through discipline. Real discipline is lonely. It's walking away from drama that once excited you. It's turning down invitations that once made you feel important. It's saying no so many times that you forget what fake enthusiasm feels like. But in that space, something extraordinary grows. Self-sufficiency. You stop needing external stimulation to feel alive. You become the source of your own energy, your own direction. To this place of inner sovereignty, every choice becomes sharper, every word more intentional, every connection more deliberate. You stop collecting people and start curating them. You stop chasing relevance and start embodying something more valuable. Authenticity that doesn't bend, clarity that doesn't compromise, presence that doesn't perform. This is what Machiavellian intelligence looks like in practice. Not manipulation, but mastery. Not deception, but discretion. Not charisma, but control over your own responses. It's about being respected in silence rather than adored in noise. It's about people wondering what you're thinking, but never being sure, because you've learned that not everything should be exposed, especially not your mind. Your mind is your kingdom. Guard it, sharpen it, rule it, and from that inner sovereignty influence the world not through noise, but through consequence. Your presence becomes a message. Your silence becomes a strategy. Your refusal to perform becomes a standard that elevates everyone around you, whether they acknowledge it or not. In the end, you become the kind of person who doesn't need to shout to be heard, who doesn't need to justify truth, who doesn't bend for acceptance. You remember what society made you forget, that a sovereign mind is the most powerful force in existence, not because it dominates others, but because it cannot be owned, cannot be bought, cannot be reduced to someone else's expectations. You no longer speak from a need to connect, but from a place of having already arrived. And when you arrive like that, without apology, without performance, without looking over your shoulder for approval, you become something rare and terrifying, completely, unapologetically yourself.